conference will now be recorded.
I hereby call to order this meeting of the King George County Board of Supervisors. At this time, I'll open the floor for public comment. Anyone here in the audience wishing to provide public comment? All right, seeing none. Mr. Dines, do we have anyone online who wishes to provide public comment? Very good. And members, do we have any correspondence wishing to be read into the record of the meeting? All right, then I'll now close public comment and I'll move on to item 3. Mr. Miller, would you like to lead us off? Motorola.
Sure. So at the last CIP work session that we had on the 12th, you all approved a number of items that were part of the ARP funding, and then you also gave us the green light on a number of CIP projects, but there were a number of CIP projects that were not, I guess, categorized as you were ready to sign off on yet. And one of those was the Motorola presentation, and we do have representatives from Motorola here, and we have Sheriff Giles as well, and we have Deputy Chief Basham as well, and they've been the two from the staff standpoint that have been involved in this. And so I think that if I recall, the direction that you asked us to pursue was, one, the history of the Motorola relationship, and then maybe a little bit more details about this particular project and why the need. So Sheriff Giles and Deputy Chief Basham can provide that. And so that was what we were looking at. And then the rest of the night, we have a couple of things. One is we have an action item that we do want to pursue, recommending that you all consider tonight regarding a sole source contract for the roll-off truck, which you approved as part of the ARP funding. We have found that the delay in getting an actual roll-off truck could extend for up to 18 months. And so we have identified one. And so Ms. Hahn was recommending that we pursue that. And then the other items that we have are the other CIP projects that were still listed, but we had not necessarily recommended anything on them because we wanted you all to consider them and kind of chew on them a little bit. We have come back with recommendations for those projects to be included. And then we have, a total amount that we're recommending and that we were recommending move forward. We also have Kyle Lau from Davenport here, who is going to be able to address any of your concerns on long-term financing. We have a number of projects that are in the future years, the out years, like next year with the preschool, the fire, the new fire station. And I think it's just a good time for Kyle to give you an overview of where, what kind of options that we do have on those kind of big projects that obviously can't necessarily fit within one, CIP year. So that's what we have. So I'll turn it over to Sheriff Giles and Deputy Chief Basham. You guys want to handle that? That's a hot seat over there. You want to sit here or you would sit there? Okay. Hot seat. Well, you're used to that, right?
Welcome, Sheriff Giles.
There you go. Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and the rest of the board. I appreciate the opportunity tonight to come and present the CIP project of the new radio system, the upgrade for the fire department and the sheriff's office, or at least the first phase of that. Tonight we've got Jeremy from Motorola, who has been running point for Motorola with hopefully the information that you guys are looking for that will help spearhead this project and get it on track so we can get it done, because this project is certainly not a project that we can wait on till even next year to that year. If we could get some sort of commitment that we could get it at least started, because it's not like we can get the approval and go out and have it by the end of the month. And this is a project that they need to engineer it. They need to put things together. They need to get tower sites, get them approved, do various things even before they can start the actual product and the actual project. So I just wanted to let you all know that it is a project that's going to be very timely, very time consuming. And the sooner we can get on track and get it started, the better off we're going to be in the long run. So I'll turn it over to Jeremy, and he's got a PowerPoint presentation that I've placed in front of you all. So enjoy.
Welcome, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, Board. Do we have a clicker? Or how do we want to drive here? Go. Okay. Perfect. Again, hey, I appreciate the opportunity to come before you tonight to speak to you about this very important project for the county. My name is Jeremy Thomas. I'm an account manager of Motorola Solutions. So just go ahead. So I've got the agenda here. So we'll talk about where we're at today with the current radio system, some of the history of procurement and the challenges that exist with the current system. Our proposed upgrade. Right now we have really a rough outline of a budgetary. We've identified some major requirements, working with your staff and first responders. As Sheriff mentioned, we do still have engineering to do to finalize that, but we've really come up with sort of a not to exceed number as that budgetary goes. So talk about the proposed upgrade and what benefits those are going to provide, overcoming the challenges that exist, and then the long-term value to the county. So we'll start off with where the system is today. So next slide, please. The current public safety communication system is a 3-site simulcast and simultaneous broadcast system. So we have the 3 sites: Owens, Accurate Auto, and then the EMS site. It's a 4-channel system. Those channels are in the VHF band. 3 of those channels being analog, and one of the channels is digital for the sheriff's office. We recently upgraded the microwave backhaul that connects all of the sites and allows those tower sites to talk to one another. The system also has dispatch consoles at the Emergency Communication Center. There's backup consoles at the Emergency Operations Center. Those consoles allow the dispatchers to talk and communicate with first responders over the radio network. System also comprises of all kinds of network alarm monitoring control, as well as the portable and mobile subscribers. Those are the portable radios that first responders carry, like on their hip. You'll see them carrying with the speaker microphone, as Sheriff has here. And then the mobile radios, the ones that go in the vehicles or fire apparatus. Okay, so next slide. So just high level, just want to go through some history of the development of the system. So probably about 17 years ago was when we expanded to a 3-site simulcast system. Again, with the 4 VHF channels, the legacy microwave. Now you see the base stations; those are called Quantars. It's a Motorola brand name, but essentially those are the transmitter receivers that go at each of the RF tower sites, as well as the network equipment associated in the console position. Okay, next slide, please. That brings us a little bit forward to 2011 was the next upgrade to the system. That's when the new sheriff's office was built. So at that time, we deployed new console positions, so growing from 3 to 4, and then reusing your assets, the older consoles, and moving those over to the EOC. That's when we also changed or upgraded the sheriff's channel from analog to digital. Okay. And the most recent upgrade to the radio network in 2017 was replacing the microwave backhaul links. Those were no longer supported, so we upgraded to the M&I backhaul, as well as replacing the network management, which does your alarm monitoring and control. Yes, sir.
These microwaves
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, Sheriff. And frankly, anywhere possible that we can leverage existing assets and reuse equipment where it makes sense, we plan to do so. And that's a great example. The microwave backhaul has great capacity. It's a supported product, and so we would continue to use that and then just essentially expand onto that network. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we talked a little bit about the current network and the history. And so, of course, with that, there are some challenges. And first and foremost, the end of life of the equipment is our number one challenge. Frankly, there are just limited parts that are available. Some of these components that make up these devices are no longer in manufacture. So we have to find refurbished units or find specialists that have stockpiled parts or may be able to repair things on a one-for-one basis, and that becomes difficult. Either finding the right people to do the job and warranty it and get turnaround and get those devices back out in the field. I mean, this is a mission-critical system that has to be up 24/7, 365, and we do everything in our power to support that system. Again, we mentioned the VHF band. There are a number of challenges with VHF. It does provide great communications over long distances, but it is an unstructured band, unlike some of the other frequency bands that public safety uses today. And with that, there is occasional intermittent interference that's actually occurring today on the system. Sometimes that can be just a nuisance, but what we are concerned about is does that interference occur when there's an emergency situation, someone's making a very important call. Again, with VHF, there's very limited capacity. The state system that the Virginia State Police and other agencies uses is VHF, so they licensed most of everything that was available in the state. So to try to expand the county system would be very challenging. There are just very few frequency licenses available. And we're actually at a point now with the growth in the county and the agencies and need for mutual aid. There is a need to expand the capacity of the county's current radio system. So again, with coverage, coverage is also now a critical need. And as the county has grown, so too has the need to improve county-wide coverage, not just on the street, but also in buildings. You have more and more buildings being developed across the county, and so we need that in-building coverage as well. And so to do that, we need to expand and add new tower sites. A lot of your neighbors, your interoperability partners, your mutual aid partners are in the 700 and 800 megahertz band. So that proposes some challenges with doing mutual aid. There are workarounds and there's ways to do that, but the easiest way to do that would be to use the same frequency band, the 700 megahertz band that they are using as well. And then certainly last but not least, just some of the technology of the current system, being any computer system 17 years old has lived a useful life, but there are a lot of new advances in technology and going to from an analog to a digital world, increased security with encryption, GPS location, things like that we can bring with the new system. Okay. Again, I don't want to go through this whole list here, but this is just some of the major components that make up the current radio system. And then on the right there is the end of support date. So we have a maintenance contract for the current radio system, and we guarantee everything that's on that maintenance contract for support. And if we can no longer guarantee it, we have to make that known. And there are items, as you can see up here, that we've had to remove from the maintenance contract. So again, we do everything in our power to provide best effort of service, and fortunately today, we've been able to, to find repair parts and things like that. But we're concerned about, what that looks like for the future. Okay. All right. So that brings us forward to the proposed upgrade, and we've had many conversations with Deputy Chief Basham and Sheriff Giles, as well as other first responders, and developed a framework of sort of a needs assessment and various requirements. So what we've developed is an outline here of a 700 megahertz, moving from the VHF to 700 megahertz band to a standards-based digital network. The standard in public safety today is called Project 25, or it's Association of Public Safety Communications Officials. You might have heard the acronym APCO. Motorola's branding of that is Astro 25. So you may see that throughout these slides. So just let you know, it's a standards base. It's not proprietary, but we brand it APCO 25, or Astro 25, excuse me. Expanding from 3 tower sites to 6 tower sites now to get that countywide in-building coverage that provides you not only the coverage that you need today, but looking down the road 15, 20 years, where are we going to see development to provide that coverage down the road as well. Increase the capacity of the system. So now this is not to get too in the weeds, but a TDMA technology. So more efficient. You can have 2 conversations on a single channel versus 1 with the current technology. Replacing the console positions, as well as those portable and mobile radios that we mentioned that the first responders carry. Oh, and also moving to the digital realm here, we bring forward some technologies, GPS location, over-the-air programming, encryption, Wi-Fi. So these are things that improve the security of the communications, as well as the efficiency. And so it's easier to program, make changes, and bringing more situational awareness to the first responder.
Can I ask a quick question before you mentioned the GPS location?
Yeah.
So right now, the radios we have, they're like, let's say we have a deputy or a firefighter who left their vehicle and we're somewhere on a scene. Right now, the radios we have do not have the technology for us to be able to track where our personnel are, right? If they're in trouble and we can't find them, we could see. If we had that technology, basically we could use it to ping where they are so we could find them and get them help, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Exactly. And it's a neat technology. I mean, you can push an emergency button and it'll send out your location to all the other folks in your agency as well. So yeah, it's very important safety feature. So addressing the needs of the network is really the phase 1, and phase 2 is to bring on the other county departments onto the radio network as well. So we've outlined here various departments, as well as in the number of mobiles and portable radios that each department would be receiving. Okay. And then phase 3 would be same theme, keeping the same theme here, bringing the schools on as well. So school staff, administrative staff, the buildings and buses. Okay. So trying to tie this back to the challenges of the current system. The advantages of the upgrade. Number 1, first and foremost, again, having a supportable system. A missions critical, robust, reliable system first responders can count on. Moving to the 700 megahertz band addresses a number of challenges, eliminating interference, providing better interoperability, more channel capacity. We're going to address the needs of the first responders for coverage, providing that county-wide coverage for in-building. Again, this Astro 25 network, a mantra that we hold near and dear is no single point of failure. So we have redundancy built throughout the system, and there's many, many layers of failure modes and fallback modes to make sure we can continue communications in inclement weather in any disaster scenario. So mentioned improved interoperability with your neighbors, the advantages of digital technology, again with the GPS and encryption. And again, this is a platform, and we'll touch on this in the next section, but we look at the long-term life of the system, and this is a platform designed for many, many years of sustainability and growth. Slide, please. So that brings us to, protecting your investment. We recognize this is a extremely important project for the county, but also a substantial investment as well. And so, once upon a time, and really what the current system technology is based on are, sort of a set it and forget it approach. And you build a system, and 10, 15 years later, you do a big forklift upgrade, and it's a big capital expenditure, and then you just replace it wholesale. And that's really difficult for budgeting. There's a number of challenges, very disruptive to do that, and you have large gaps where you fall behind in technology. So the current plan that we go forward with is our Astro 25 platform, and there's really no end of life in our roadmap. I mean, we project our roadmap out 20, 25 years of how long can we support these systems, and we have no end of life for the next 20 plus years. And so how do we do that? We have a proven process with our maintenance plan, 24/7 monitoring of the network. I brought Dale Scott. He's our customer service manager, lives locally here, actually 20 minutes away. And then so he'll work with, as well as myself, with the county, to address any maintenance need. We have tracking tickets, and we work any issue to resolution. A lot of times that there will be an alarm that goes off that we can address it and troubleshoot it before anyone ever even knows about it. And part of that team also, I want to point out, is Chris Bankert. He's with our partner communication specialist. It's a shop full of trained and certified technicians. We have a very rigorous training requirement and program. And so they're also located in Fredericksburg, so close by as well. So it's great having a local team here to support the county. But as I mentioned before, products can only be supported for so long. And so maintenance is one pillar, but our system refresh program, that's part of this comprehensive support plan, is another important piece. So we will have a regular cadence of refreshes and upgrades to the system. So that's software, it's firmware, and it's hardware as well. You go and there are devices such as I'll throw out a brand, Cisco or Aruba or other manufacturers of networking equipment for routers and switches and things that we don't develop, but we work closely with them. So we're aligned with their roadmap, and we know when is the right time to replace that device before we reach an end-of-life situation. So we want to make sure we can always support and maintain every device in your radio network. And so we will continually touch base with you, have communications, and talk about when's the right time to do those upgrades. So we'll refresh the system. And I guess I'd say one more thing, and another thing that does is that those refreshes bring not just maintainability, but also new capabilities, new features as well. So every year we have a new software system release to our system, and we bring new capabilities every year as well. So you'll get to take advantage of that as well. So with that, the advantage of this plan, it's a predictable cost. Instead of every 10 to 15 years, as a major forklift upgrade and capital expenditure, now it's just a year-over-year cost. It's very favorable contract language. There's, if we have procurement folks in the room, there's termination for cause and things like that. So the plan supports the entire public safety network. So there are devices that are third party, but it doesn't matter if it's another vendor's network switch or microwave or other device. All you call Motorola. So the one throat to choke approach, right? So we are responsible. We are your one vendor to support all of that network. And again, no more forklift upgrades, and staying current with technology. So, I think that's it. Yep. I guess. So what does all that mean? To me, it means, and hopefully for you, it means peace of mind.
Thank you. Questions from my colleagues? Mr. Stonehill, do you want to start?
not really questions. I know this is definitely something that we got to take care of because this has been an ongoing issue for a lot of years. Thank you for coming, give us a lot of information. I don't really have any questions per se, though.
Thank you, Ms. Bender.
I would agree with that. I'd just like to move on to the financing part.
Mr. Granger.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Thomas, thank you for coming out. I appreciate the brief and coming here to give it to us so that we can better understand. So I like the idea of no end of life, at least planned end of life. I understand things can evolve and we don't know in perpetuity where things are going to be, which is understandable. I assume, though, you mean like the technology of using the 700, 800 megahertz band, and that's the plan to go forward, or could that even change down the road?
That would be our preferred method to move forward. And,
Okay.
And it makes sense also from an interoperability standpoint.
Okay.
Yes, the majority of your interoperability partners are in that same band. There are licenses. We've done some research, and there are licenses available, so it's easily licensable. And we've already done some coverage analysis as well, so we can provide great coverage throughout the county in that band as well. So it really is a great fit.
Okay. So obviously this would be a forklift, that term that you were using for this current time.
Correct.
And so tracking with that, and so I see the dollar figure, at least on our sheet, that kind of goes within, that is a significant figure.
Yes.
And so how often are those refreshes though? And is that going to be briefed out, like how regular that is and what kind of on average cost? Do we have any kind of, price sheet on that to understand how regularly we're going to have to be making updates and what that cost would be?
Right. So that would be rolled into, say, like an annual maintenance plan, and it's a pay as you go. If you have a maintenance plan with us today, so we would essentially add this refresh component to the maintenance plan. Unfortunately, I don't have numbers here today because we still need to really finalize the engineering and the design of the system. And once we have that finalized design, then we'll know what the cost and what that would look like for the ongoing maintenance and those refreshes. Refreshes, though, are typically done on a biannual, so every 2 to 4 year basis. It really just depends on what the network's comprised of.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I don't really have any other questions. I would just say I'd like to maybe see some of that information before we make a final decision on allocating dollars, though.
Thank you. So essentially, the technology we have in place right now is like 20 years old. So it's basically like 20 years ago, I had a flip phone, and now I have, two, a county phone and a personal phone that are basically, I can carry a computer with me everywhere I go. Is that kind of a fair analogy of
Really good analogy.
the jump that we're looking at and how archaic the equipment is that these men and women are having to rely on to protect and provide for the safety of all of us? Okay.
Right.
And I guess that's kind of a question, kind of a comment, and I'll leave it at that if we can roll on to the financing piece. Unless you had something else you wanted to say, Sheriff Giles.
I just want to reiterate and remind that there is already a contract that Suffolk had, and we can ride on that contract. So that would eliminate a lot of time and effort. Yeah.
Right. That's a competitive bid contract. Yes. They have, the rider clause agreements and things like that, the necessary verbiage and so forth. So it's a very popular one in Virginia for a lot of counties too. So.
I mean, Dean's already looked at it. If you guys approve it, we'll go.
Thank you all. Mr. Miller?
Well, I think the main thing is you're looking at a situation where you would be making the commitment this year, or telling us you want to put together an RFP or piggybacking on this Suffolk County contract. But I don't know if the financial commitment is necessarily required until the next fiscal year. Is that correct, Sheriff? Okay. So there are options to finance. And I think that's something that, we talked with Kyle from Davenport, and I know that the Motorola folks have a plan as well. So, I mean, that does give you that flexibility to do that. I don't know that we want to necessarily get into that tonight. I don't know if Kyle is able to really, talk to that, or if the Motorola folks are really able to talk about it. I know that that's an option. There's some options. Obviously, 10.9 is not something that you're going to be able to absorb next year, where you're just not doing anything else. And I know this is very critical, but we've got to obviously try to do other projects as well. But the other thing is phase 2 and 3 are not inclusive of this 10.9. So I think that needs to be understood too. And that is obviously the most critical element is the phase 1 and getting that going. And I think everybody else in the county recognizes that. So now I guess the question is, would the SROs that are in the schools, they would be a part of this though, correct? Okay. Any personnel of yours would be a part of this. Okay.
So I think, Mr. Thomas, you had made the statement that you don't have all of the information tonight to be able to really give us a number, is what you had said during your presentation. Did I hear that correctly?
Right, that's correct.
So perhaps rather than go down that road, we could just get some general advice from Kyle as far as pros, cons of entering this sort of service agreement versus bond financing, or, what would there be an impact on our credit rating if we did something like this with them? And I don't want to go too far ahead, but I do feel like the board does want to hear a little bit more about the financing piece tonight, even though we don't necessarily need to I understand what you're saying, Mr. Miller. We don't need to make a financial commitment this year, but I think you're here, Kyle, and I appreciate very much that you're here. And so I don't want it to seem like we asked you to be here, but we didn't need you here. So I think we need you here and would love to hear from you.
Always happy to talk if you're willing to give me the mic and hopefully not be too long-winded and take up too much time. But I think where and I don't know a ton about this, but I think just in the grand scheme of where we are as a county, knowing that we've just taken on the courthouse and knowing that we've got this radio that is a critical priority for the public safety folks, it's all a policy decision of yours, doesn't make any difference to us. I think what we would recommend, which is no different than we just did on the service authority, no different than we did when we did the courthouse, is to see and understand where this fits within the overall CIP and overall continuum. So instead of looking at it in a vacuum, look at it in the context of all the other projects and how does that fit in, knowing that we've taken on the courthouse, no surprises there, worked out very well. Knowing there's other called major projects within the CIP. Again, always your decisions from a policy standpoint, whether they're fire stations, school projects, et cetera, because it is a big number, relatively speaking. Maybe I should use a term, it's a material number. I don't say big or small, it's maybe too judgmental there, but it's a material number. And so getting back to the rating agency side of things, to add $11 million, we want to make sure we had a good defensible plan as to how that's going to get absorbed within the overall budget, whether it's the capital fund, the general fund, knowing that the landfill dollars are largely spoken for, knowing that we've got a new revenue stream in cigarette taxes that is still very much unproven to date. So I think in the grand scheme of things, what we'd want to do and recommend is take this along with the rest of the CIP and be able to show what this looks like, is also along with what does this look like with the other things that are being talked about. No different than we've done in past years with the general fund CIP, and in fairness, what we just did with the service authority for those on that board. So if that's helpful in the short run, that would be our recommendation. I think we could do all of that as well, knowing that you're rolling from, it's right now basically November 1, fast forward a little bit. That's all very doable over the next couple months. It's kind of in the typical cycle anyway, where Donna's going to be cleaning up fiscal year 21, know what those numbers look like, really know and understand really well what resources are available in the capital fund, in the general fund, and maybe have a little bit better picture of maybe what cigarette taxes look like. Take those variables over the course of what might be November, December, and come back with a plan and an update on that side of things.
Thank you. Questions from my colleagues? Anyone? No? Okay, Mr. Miller.
If I may, when you work with other jurisdictions, other agencies, and you do, a project that they're most likely not doing lump sum arrangements either. What is the typical process what's the length of a contract, or, to pay it out, or that kind of a thing? Does that make sense? Or am I?
So, yeah, I would say that it's probably the majority of at least contracts I'm aware of have financed through a bond, but there are not a vast majority, meaning there are a substantial number of folks that have moved forward with financing through Motorola, but usually you don't see like the large capital outlay, just lump sum in year one, right? Which is paid over a term of 7 to 10 years. Pretty common.
Okay, what's the useful life? If I could ask a question up front. What's the useful life of the equipment that'll be put in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with the maintenance and refresh program, essentially, we'll continue to support that in perpetuity. Again, barring wholesale large technology change or other standards or FCC guidelines that force us to go a different route. But I mean, our goal is to really have this maintenance plan that continues to refresh the system and move forward.
So the 11 million. So that's the capital piece of it, right? So that's whatever it is. It's radios and handhelds and base and all the various things. Right. That's the hard stuff, if you will. And so does that have a useful life, or is that the theory being those the hardware per se is available into perpetuity? At some point you got to replace that kind of stuff. Right.
And then that's what we'll replace, as needed as we go forward with our maintenance to refresh plan.
Okay.
Right. There's a component of the capital expense and then the ongoing sort of, if you wanted to use like an automotive analogy, just kind of easy. If you buy a new car, you buy a maintenance plan and you get your oil changed and things like that over time.
And so the buying of the car is roughly speaking 11 million.
Correct.
And the maintenance plan is separate.
Yes.
That's okay.
Now, that'll be years from you go through my app. Okay. What you doing now? Right. That's right.
So what we can do, it would be nice to get this approved at your next board meeting, but obviously you guys are in control of that. It'd be nice if we get November and CIP's done. So, I mean, obviously we have 2 meetings in November. I was hoping that we'd get this, but I realize it's not my call. It's your call. But I think the question that I would have is, do you feel that you have enough at this point, or you want to see some more information on financing before you make a commitment on this project, knowing that if you make the commitment contractually, you get underway, you're going to deal with it next year. I mean, obviously that's something that you'll have to deal with, and we get all this other look that Kyle could do, and we get some more information. So is that the preference at this point, the direction?
So I'll poll my colleagues. Go ahead, Mr. Granger.
I would like to know what the delta is on the current maintenance plan to what the proposed maintenance plan would be, just so we understand what we're getting into, because obviously we'll have to fund the sheriff's department to cover that delta. I assume it will probably be more. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it'll be less, and that'd be fantastic. But I anticipate it'll probably be more.
Thank you, Mr. Granger. Ms. Bender?
I understand the importance of this, but I need to have more questions on the financing side, especially since we have quite a few big ticket items that are going to come on our doorstep in the next year.
Thank you, Ms. Bender. Mr. Stonehill?
I'd probably echo that. I mean, and we've got to do it, but the financing and, to hear from Motorola, whatever they get, Jeremy, whatever information that you can supply us, and then get with Kyle and see where these funds are going to come from to cover this. So.
Thank you, Mr. Stonehill. And I agree. I concur with my colleagues. I think we have some sound financial advice here, and it gives us a reason. Yes, we absolutely need it. I think we all can agree. We all have agreed on that here this evening. It's just a question of the timing and what that looks like. Yeah, and where exactly, where the money is going to come from. So, yeah, I would have loved to have wrapped this in November myself as well, but I'm not sure that's realistic. But I think we have a good step in the right direction and have an idea of, where we need to head.
Great. And so what we'll do is we'll go to work on getting some more of the financial information, some ideas from Kyle. I think it'll also, as this meeting goes forward here tonight, we'll get a little bit more discussion about some of those other big ticket items like the preschool and the firehouse and things like that. So we can give you some more wrap up on that. We'll get with Sheriff Giles and Deputy Chief Basham, get a little bit more information from the Motorola folks so that we can provide that. And we can wait until after we're finished with all of this tonight, when you can tell us when you want to have that information, because obviously, yeah.
Very good. All right, then. Thank you all very much for your time. We appreciate you coming out. Thank you.
Okay, so the next item on here is we do have an action item that we had requested, and we did talk to the chair, Ms. Kupka, about this item. I know typically this would be on a regular board meeting, but we had requested that we move on this pretty quickly so that we could get this roll-off truck secure so that we wouldn't hit another 250,000 miles on the one with 1 million miles already. So, but anyway, I'll let Ms. Hahn handle this.
Yeah. Welcome, Ms. Hahn.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. Currently, the King George County Convenience Centers use a vendor to retrieve containers from Perkins Convenience Center and haul them to the county landfill, and then return the containers to Perkins Convenience Center at a cost of $60,000 plus a year. The landfill director requested to purchase a roll-off truck in the 2021-2022 CIP. During the CIP work sessions, it was recommended that this purchase be made with the use of the American Rescue Plan funds. At the Board of Supervisors meeting on October 19th, 2021, this request was approved and funds allocated. Due to the impacts of COVID-19, the supply chain has been substantially hindered, and many items are almost impossible to procure. Staff made a comprehensive search for a qualifying roll-off truck prior to the CIP process and have only been able to locate one company that can provide the required truck within our required timeline of early winter. It is my opinion that a sole source designation is appropriate. Therefore, I recommend that the Board of Supervisors authorize the county administrator to issue a notice of sole source award to East Coast Truck and Trailer Sales Incorporated in the amount of $199,145 and authorize the county administrator to execute a goods services agreement approved as deformed by the county attorney. And there was a copy of their quote included in your packet there.
Thank you, Ms. Hahn. Questions? Mr. Granger?
So this truck would be available like next couple months is what you're saying?
Yes. So what happens is that once we do our contract with them, they will put it in line at the fabrication. It needs some fabrication done to it to be suitable for the job that we're going to do with it. And it gets them put in line for that. And so once they have a definitive commitment from us, they can give us a more firm, they're talking about December, January timeframe. And all the others, it was probably late 2022 and even into 2023.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you. That helps to understand a lot, and that's great news.
Ms. Bender?
No, it makes sense.
Mr. Stonehill? So I have a question, and I'm asking this question for a very specific reason. So does the board typically issue or authorize the administrator to issue a notice of sole source award? Or would it be more appropriate for the board to authorize staff to execute a contract with the provision of a sole source designation? Because that's something that your department has come up with, and I'm not sure it's proper for the board to do that. So could we authorize the county administrator to execute a contract with the provision of a sole source designation with East Coast Truck and Trailer Sales in the amount of approved as to form by the county attorney? Would that also
that would
fit
suffice
the bill for what you need?
Once you approve to or authorize him to execute a contract, then we normally would make a notice of award. So we'll make a notice of a sole source award.
I'm just not comfortable with the board making that statement because the procurement,
right,
and that's the function of the purchasing agent, not the board.
Right.
So I just want to make sure so my colleagues understand.
Could you restate that for me one more time? Just make sure I get the...
Here, I'll just hand it to you. So would that be agreeable to you, Ms. Hahn?
Yes, that would
meet the needs to be able to get this out and
get rolling.
The wheels rolling on the truck, so to
Yes,
speak.
ma'am.
Okay.
All right, I move to authorize the county administrator to execute a contract with the provision of a sole source designation with East Coast Truck and Trailer Sales Incorporated in the amount of $199,145.00, approved as to form by the county attorney.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Hahn, and thank you for indulging me.
Thank you. This is not something I like to do. I don't like to do sole sources. Obviously, there are times when you have to do it, but this is one of those situations that if we don't act, we aren't going to see a roll-off truck until 2023.
And that's why when staff requested it be on the agenda for tonight, I said, yes, that's something that you all cannot wait until November 9th for. So I appreciate you appreciating the timeliness of the need and getting it done. So thank you for your work on this.
Yeah, and I just also would like to point out that my first CIP with you, we've already saved $25,000.
All right. So moving on, CIP recommendations. Mr. Miller, do you want to lead us off?
Yes. So at the last work session, you all basically approved the ones that we had, which were to the tune of about 3.6, I think, is what it. Okay.
I just put this in again.
Okay.
In the presentation. This is the funding stream that we had identified.
I'm going to turn it over to Donna. Let her run this. She's doing good, better than me.
So I included this again in your packet. This is the funding stream, what the funds that we have identified that can be used for the CIP. Next slide, please. And this was, I wanted to include in here what you had previously looked at, not necessarily approved because we haven't gotten to that point yet, but you all were, I think, pretty much in agreement with these items, and that was like get my copy out here. $3.6 million. And then the next slide, Mr. Dines. And so Mr. Miller and I went back and looked at some additional items that could be added to that possibly. They are the Sielston Sports Complex lighting at $350,000. The Sielston Sports Complex upgrades at $150,000. The Barnesfield Park park lighting for $300,000, and some of these there might be more in sequential years, but that we were looking at the first year of those. The countywide Cisco Meraki equipment at $55,000. The countywide Avaya voice over IP phone equipment accessories at $60,000. And then we went ahead and put in the finance system for the rest of the project if we wanted to allocate the funds now, or we could, if we don't want to go that much, we can carry that over to next year. But it's just something that we need to be, if we go into this project, we have to be committed for the full project and not just the first half of the project. And those additional ones totaled $1.5 million for a total of almost $5.2 million. And
Thank you, Ms. Hahn. Questions from my colleagues? Sure. Ms. Bender, do you have one if you're ready?
Questions on the additional recommendations? All right.
Yep.
Just a quick question. What is this Cisco Meraki? Meraki?
Mr. Dines?
I like Meraki.
Good evening. Those are pieces of equipment that could range from security cameras to switches to Wi-Fi devices in places that don't have the proper internet access that we have. Like one example would be things that go on at the convenience centers. Sometimes they're not able to view things really quickly, and we had to go through a DVR that might have 96. Like today, they had to get one for something that was dropped off there off hours, and it was 96 gigs worth of camera footage because there's 3 cameras, and they wanted it for 12 hours. So if they had a system, they had internet there, or some kind of device that could get them to LTE, internet broadband, then they would be able to use the Meraki cameras, and they could get more coverage, and they would be able to pull up things and see the illegal activities that might go on there. So it's just bunches of equipment like that some of the offices can use. More security cameras, like at the library doesn't have anything outside. There's been things happen at the library on the outside of the building sometimes, and they like to see what goes on. So
this is basically a security system?
Most of it is, yes.
Okay. And then the phone equipment? Is that
the phone equipment is part of the Avaya system that some of the offices had wanted extra things like headphones so that they could move throughout their office and answer their phone and help their customers, because sometimes they don't have enough people working at the same time with the staff. Could be some people out for whatever reason, and if they had coverage of their phone and they could also do their work as they move around their office regularly, they would be able to pick those up. And then there's also basic things that some of the offices need, like sidecars for people who have a bunch of different numbers that they call regularly, and they can just push a button and get there. And there's also, we have started to try to get things where the offices can have their own redundancy so that they're not relying on the admin building for the phone, because that's the main place where the phone system is, the server is there. But if we have some equipment built in, then if something happened to the admin building, they wouldn't have to worry about their phones not working because they would have another path to do that and to get out to their phone calls to the outside.
Thank you. I have two more questions, but Chris, thank you for your answers. I guess Donna would be my next one. The finance system,
Don't go anywhere, sir.
Is that a
Thank you.
4-year, this would just pay for it all at the same time, or?
No, it was just to go ahead and appropriate the funds for it, but it would be over the course of the installation.
Okay.
And it also includes a project manager to cover for 4 years.
Okay.
So.
And then my last question is for Chris. I didn't leave you out. So, I understand the lighting, especially at Barnesville now. There's a lot of activity that goes down there, and having the lighting also allows teams to rent the space, right, to have tournaments if we had better lighting, correct?
Correct. So that 300,000 would be just to retrofit Field A from its obsolete lights to modern LED lights.
And how about at Sielston? That's just adding them, correct?
Sielston would be adding 2 soccer fields worth
Okay.
of lights, which would then give us rectangular fields lit in addition to the pit.
And then on the complex upgrades, what would they entail?
That is a playground for Sielston Sports Complex and sand volleyball courts.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Granger, are you ready?
Yes, ma'am. Start with Mr. Clark. So Barnesfield, I see that it was asking for next year, but we're looking at this year, which is fine. But I see then in the following year as well, there's another 600,000. What was the proposal for that?
That would be to fully light the complex to all 3 fields that are currently into the 300-foot softball fields.
Okay.
One of the items would be there is currently a Economic Development Association grant program for the National EDA where tourism projects are possible. We're looking to bring that to y'all on the 9th of November as something to look at if that is the project that Parks and Recreation should be approaching to try to, it's a competitive grant process. Can't promise anything, but that's where we do most of our tourism and looking to bring that to you all then.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Clark. Mr. Dines, so about the Meraki equipment. So I see that as well as there's a line item for equipment maintenance renewals a couple years out. Does that take into account this equipment request that is on for this year plus other equipment? What is that renewal for exactly? Just trying to understand. Does that change? Is there any delta based on if we don't approve the Meraki this year? Or I know that's a couple years down the road, but I'm just trying to figure out what kind of obligations, because obviously if you get equipment, you don't want to just let it languish and become obsolete. So.
Right. So what they usually do when you buy the Meraki devices, you pay up front for it. It depends on your normal buying sequence. Like if you do 3-year maintenance or 5 years, sometimes you get good deals on 5 years.
Okay.
So when we buy Meraki equipment, and we have bought so much that we always are able to push back when we're going to have to renew. Like if you see in the future CIPs, I think I have money allocated for those in 2023.
Yes, that's the one I'm looking at.
Right. So that's when all of the devices that we currently have, they're all grouped in.
Okay.
That's probably 100 pieces of equipment.
Okay.
And so that's why that is so high, because all those will be up for their maintenance renewal during that time. So when we buy things now, we will pay for whatever period we have, and then that will push back to the next, once we renew in the 23, it'll push back these, and they'll be, for the most part, probably 27. The next big line item will come through with the CIP for the renewal.
Okay. That makes sense. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Dines.
You're welcome.
That's all the questions I have.
Thank you, Mr. Granger. Mr. Stonehill.
I think anything I had was answered. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Stonehill. So thank you for asking the question about the maintenance for Mr. Dines, because I was going to ask that question. So Mr. Clark, can you expand upon, I believe your department conducted a survey in addition to the needs assessment from back in, I think, 2017. You recently conducted a survey of the public with regard to wish list items, and where did these items fall in that survey?
The Sielston Sports Complex lighting was 60% of our respondents named it as important and very important. 18 named it their number one item. The Planning Commission had rated that as a 3 as well. The sports complex upgrades, the playground, I think is a little skewed because some of the folks I don't think read the descriptions, but we did have 59% labeled that as important or very important, and 15 named it number 1. But I don't know that all the soccer folks that responded went in and read that it was a playground and volleyball courts. I think some of them thought it might be other changes to the park. So I don't know that I'd call those completely scientific numbers.
What was the Planning Commission's?
Planning Commission on that one rated that a 5. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's also a 5. I'm looking at the wrong sheet, but they rated that a 5. The Barnesfield lighting, that was a 50% important, very important. 11 named it their number one item. I'm going to guess all 11 of those folks were King George Little League folks. And the Planning Commission rated that a 4.
Okay. And so why I ask, well, one is the playground at Sielston. I get that our county-owned property doesn't have a playground, but the school does have a playground there, and I do appreciate the fact that some parents might not want to, if they're trying to watch the soccer game, might not want to send their child back over their left shoulder here to the school playground, but there is a playground there right now, so that's the thing that I'm kind of on the fence on as far as, is that a want or a need right now?
Obviously, for the soccer fields, the playground is just over your shoulder. For those that come to play baseball and softball, that playground is a very long way away, and not one where you would send, as a parent of 4, not one where I would even send my 10-year-old by himself to play. It is a long distance. There are programs as well right now with a couple of the playground companies where we may be able to approach grant funding to be 50-50 match. I can also tell you playgrounds, I was just at our state conference, playground equipment is at least at a 20-week lead time.
Yep. All right. And I like that you all are looking at the EDA grant for the future lighting, because that at Barnesfield definitely for baseball and softball, and then that sports tourism is huge. And this board, we had the joint meeting with the tourism committee, and we talked about the need to try to give you the resources the county needs to be able to attract some of these bigger tournaments. And I know the soccer field lighting, we really can't host a major tournament because there are only so many hours of light in the day. And at least with some of the baseball, we can hobble it together, but it would be really great to be able to offer more opportunities. I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you. All right, Mr. Miller.
We're ready for you to.
Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Hahn.
So the next slide, as Mr. Dines runs back to, is, so we would like direction from the board as to how you want us to proceed. Do you want to include all the projects that we have listed here? Do you want us to strike anything? Are you ready for us to come up with the funding, what funding is going to go to each project?
Which projects?
And present that at the next board meeting? Or do you want another CIP to look at that?
So I'll poll my colleagues as far as the
If
will
I
of the
may
board.
interrupt,
Go ahead, Mr.
the
Long.
other thing that's important is that if you go back to the total revenue that we had available and then what we're projecting or we're proposing for projects, you still have a real healthy amount that we're going to put towards reserve. And that will be critical, obviously, in some of these future years. Obviously, it's not going to fund all some of these, these projects, but it at least gives us some kind of a base from which to deal with. It also allows us, if the cigarette tax money doesn't come in at the level that we are hoping it comes in, then we have some resources to pull from there. But that was one of the things that we really were very cognizant of. Would love to get, some of these big projects in future years committed, but obviously I think that's why Kyle is here, is to be able to address some of those and maybe some strategies that we can be thinking about over the course of the next 6 to 9 months or a year. And so,
if I could piggyback
Yeah.
on that, the other, I know somebody can go back a couple slides, but in terms of the revenue sources, one other note that I would make, at least in terms of how we think about this, is that top line item, and Donna can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going to round that off and call it $2 million. It's like $1,989,000. That's really recurring revenue. So it's dependent upon if the cigarette tax comes in and at what level, et cetera, and probably some other dollars in the general fund. But you're looking at a singular year of the CIP for the moment. But that top line, so you get about 2 million out of the 6.4 that really is recurring each and every year, right? So that 2 million is maybe for these initial projects. Next year, barring a big surprise, you should have roundabouts, probably another 2 million, another 2 million, another 2 million. That's different than, at least what I think I understand, and the balance of the line items there, and Donna, you correct me if I'm wrong, which is dollars we have in the bank, fund balance dollars, or money that we have appropriated towards a project that maybe we're not going to move or we're going to rearrange. And so those are, at least in our mind, those are one-time dollars. And so it's kind of a difference as we think about this between the dollars that maybe are coming out of our salary to do projects versus the dollars that we're dipping into our savings account a little bit. So there's about 2 million of that 8.4 that is coming out of our, call it our monthly paycheck, so to speak, really annual in the sense of the county budget. And there's another 6.4 that is coming out of our sort of side savings account, if you will, for capital projects. I think Mr. Miller made an important point, which is that's all before we get to real year-end numbers for FY 2021, and knowing for the moment that we've had a good year. So I think as we think about this, and as we're going to be working on some more numbers with Mr. Miller and Donna in terms of how do all these different pieces fit together, I think what we see, and no different than when we did the courthouse last year, we had programmed in a certain amount of money that was going to be basically consistent each and every year, that was going to go towards what we call pay-go capital projects. All this kind of stuff that pops up about every year, and you got to take care of it whether you want to or not. That we tend to think about a little differently than we do we'll call it the big projects, for lack of a better term, which is like the courthouse, the radio system that we just talked about. We've looked at buildings, fire stations, schools, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think what we see here is an ability to certainly get some things that are all a policy decision of you collectively going, without making a difference to us on which projects are what. But what it allows you to do is get you going on those projects. And one other recommendation that we have is, we've mentioned this, and we can get this to you, is to put in place what we call reimbursement resolution. And so what a reimbursement resolution allows you to do, it doesn't obligate you to do, is as you work through the balance of this fiscal year, and as you go into the next fiscal year, as we look at all these different pieces, see how they fit together, if we want to, and I stress that term want, go back and maybe borrow for some of these projects, knowing that rates are very, very low, and knowing that we want to maintain our fund balance to the greatest extent possible,
we would have the ability to kind of go back and reimburse ourselves from a future borrower. But it's not an obligation to go back and borrow. It simply puts a marker in place for tax code purposes. It says, look, if we get a year down the line and we feel like we'd like to spend some dollars in some capital projects, we'd like to get some of that back in our reserves, we would have the ability to do that without the obligation. And it's really it's a pretty simple document or resolution, whatever you want to call it, it's resolution technically, that you can put in place that as you're adopting the CIP, at your next board meeting, whenever it is, we can have bond counsel put that together. It's literally like a one-pager. I think it doesn't obligate you to anything. It's a sort of nuance in the tax code that says, if we get a year down the line, we say, man, we kind of wish we had some of those dollars back in our reserve. It gives you that ability. So I just offered that as a collective recommendation, just purely for flexibility and allowing you to kind of take some incremental steps over the balance of this fiscal year and then planning into next fiscal year, et cetera, et cetera. That's helpful.
Thank you. Questions from members?
I just have, what is our fund balance for capital projects? I know we've talked about it before and I just don't recall. I apologize.
The fiscal year 21 audit hasn't been completed,
I understand.
but let me go back in. That I had that in our first,
Yes.
the anticipated, and was in our first CIP meeting on September 28th, and it's downloading that. So it'll take me just a moment.
Okay.
I think it was like 6.8. I think it's
That sounds
$6,815,000.
about right to me, but none of that was any of those dollars in that.
Well, no,
top line.
those dollars, like
I just
Mr.
wanted to make sure
Lau
that
mentioned, that everything except the top line is projects that are included in that,
Yes.
and it's not. And we didn't identify everything that's left. We just, some of the things that we know we've got
Yes.
that we're not going to be using, but there's still money in other CIP projects from the past.
Yes. You don't need to pull it up. That sounds about right to me. It was roughly think of this one. I was asking. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Granger. Ms. Bender, did you have anything else you want to ask?
Yes, I have a question for Kyle, and this is long-term thinking, especially since we're talking about the Motorola contract and understanding the fire station and a possible either redoing a building for a preschool or building a new preschool. Would that be something, if we had to do it all at once, sort of, and where I'm getting at is how we refinanced the courthouse and we rolled in other projects and got a better rate. So is that something you look at also?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And that's what we'd be thinking about. I mean, certainly any one of those projects by itself has enough scale to it. You could do it by yourself. I think what we want to see and out there is the timing of it. And I think what's going to be really important is when we do, like, if you remember with the courthouse, we know landfill dollars are basically tapped out. And so what from a budgetary perspective is really the impact of doing the Motorola thing, plus any of the variety of other things. So that's what we can play with some scenarios. So to your point, Ms. Bender, we can say, all right, we just do this one thing, call it the Motorola project for the moment. What does that look like budgetarily? Because maybe we add a sequential fire station onto that. We add a sequential preschool onto that. What's then the incremental additional impact to the budget?
That's what I would like to see, because that would make more sense, because I know we saved a lot of money by lumping everything together in the courthouse bond. Thank you.
Mr. Stonehill, did you have any other questions? Okay. So what then, I'm going to bring it back around. What then is the will of the board with regard to, did we want to go ahead and have finance department staff bring these items back to us at the November 9th meeting, and then move forward with the bigger picture, knowing that just what's being proposed here today, it looks like total available fund is $8.4 million. Request is a little under 5.2 million. So we still have about a $3.2 million cushion, even if we were to go ahead with everything proposed here tonight.
Actually, could I ask a question? So I see
Sure.
we have the amount needed, we have previous appropriations, and so the total project is the I'm sorry, let me collect my thoughts for a second. So on the recommended slide, it showed a total of 3.6 million for amount needed and 4.4 million for total projects, because 800,000 was on previously appropriations for the tennis court, the Sidell Brooks Park, the King George Middle School baseball and softball lighting, and so it was those three things. But then on the additional CIP recommendations, it shows the amount needed being 5.1 million, but within the total projects be actually practically 6 million, because it's almost 2. So it'd be 6 million needed. So it's actually would be, is that an accurate statement? Yeah. Okay.
So it's like a 2.5 million, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to make sure I was tracking with that accurately.
Madam Chair, I have one more question.
Go ahead, Ms. Bender.
Then the Fairview Beach, just for public knowledge, is is a grant, so that money is being returned to the county, correct?
The majority of it is an in-kind grant. I was just speaking with Chief Lynn earlier this evening, and but part of phase 2 is the county is going to be required for a match. Right now, the funds that we're showing in here that are remaining was we've paid everything out. And this is something that Travis Kusenberry and I sat down and discussed. And we haven't gotten any of the reimbursements yet from FEMA. And Chief Lynn is estimating that the county's portion is only about $60,000.
So the 2.5 was, I think, accurate. Travis.
Because we had identified, we lowered it down to 2.25 to anticipate any additional change orders or anything.
Right. And I understand why it has to be a placeholder, because we don't have the money from FEMA yet, so it has to be there.
Right.
I just want, if the public
Right.
is
So
watching.
we have to pay it out up front, and then we get reimbursed. And these funds right here are after what we've already paid out, and after what we have encumbered with both Schneibel, the engineering company, and Finish Line for the construction work.
Right. Thank you.
Anyone else?
So
Mr. Ranger?
for I don't have any other questions. I was just going to give my 2 cents. Okay. Additional CIP projects. So I would say the county-wide Cisco Meraki and the county-wide Avaya VoIP system, I would agree with adding. The finance system, my only concern is the idea of obligating future boards that look of, hey, this is for years 2 through 4, which we're not even at and we're not really discussing. And I know at the end of the day, it's like when we buy buses, we do it every year. But just, the fact that you give that board then that opportunity to make that decision. To me, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. Either we do it now or we do it next year. And so I'm kind of inclined to say, let's just wait till next year to do it for that sake. Other than that, the lighting. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So my question would be,
sure,
you're not talking about the entire financial system.
I'm talking
pushed
about years
off
2 through
until
4.
Okay.
No, I'm just saying.
We've already.
I'm saying move forward with this year's. It's just
Yes, but you've already approved the money in the ARP funds. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
just wanted to clarify.
Fair question. I'm not trying to stop it. It's just the fact that now we're talking about years 2 through 4 and just that appearance and how it's supposed to.
Well, it's not so much years 2 through 4 as when you go into these kind of things, you have to pay a certain, and I don't even know what until we go out to the RFP, but you have to pay a certain amount just to get them started.
Okay.
And then when it's complete, you have to pay the rest of it.
Okay.
So since we've already committed phase one, we
I know.
need to commit the rest of it
I agree.
at some point because we can't stop the vendor halfway in the middle of a contract.
Okay.
Because the contract will be,
So then it is, yeah, I would say then we should obligate all the dollars right now because otherwise
why
it gives the wrong impression that it's an option even. It's not an option then.
right. And that's why we included it
Okay.
in.
I apologize.
it's on there.
Then yes, I don't even like the idea that it was separated at all. Then I would say that you'd almost have to say, it's like when you get the bond. Yeah, we might not spend it all this year, but it's because that just takes time. That's fine. Okay. So I would say then, yeah, I apologize. I would like to leave that one on. As for the lighting, and thank you. You convinced me. That makes a lot of sense. So thank you for that. Man, I just, it's a lot. I can maybe get behind doing one of those. I don't know. I'll leave it to my colleagues though to maybe chime in.
So I would ask then whether this maybe is a question for Donna. The second tranche of ARPA funds that we would have access to in July, could we also use those for revenue replacement projects? So if we weren't perhaps inclined to move forward with some of those items, but Mr. Clark had identified them as potential revenue replacement items, could we?
When I did the calculations for revenue replacement, the revenue replacement total was greater than our total amount
allocation.
That we were
Right. And I do
and we've
recall that.
committed. We've paid $500,000 to broadband, another $150,000 committed. So our available pot is even lower, and the revenue replacement is greater.
Go ahead, Mr. Miller.
But the 150 comes out of next year's. So that's
Yes,
the only
the
project that
150.
you have already made a commitment.
For the new
would
grant that the
reduce that.
application is pending
Yes.
before VATI right now.
So really you're looking at roughly about what?
2.6
2.4
minus the 150. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2.4. Go ahead, Ms. Bender.
Oh, being a big proponent for the last 2 years of sports tourism, the lighting I understand is really important, and you can make a lot of money off of soccer tournaments. So being able to host those helps Parks and Rec be viable and continue on, and maybe not have to have so much funding from the CIP. They could be self-sufficient in some respects. The only two that I thought could be maybe dropped off would be the phone equipment, accessories, and the Sielston Sports Complex upgrades for this year. But the lighting I thought was extremely important.
Mr. Stonehill, do you have anything else you wish to share?
If I was going to cut anything, it would be the sports complex upgrades. I think all the other ones are definitely things that we need. I agree with Mrs. Bender. You know, the lighting is key to bring some folks here to the county for tourism and sports tourism. And I know the equipment and everything we certainly need. So if I was going to do anything, I would cut that one out.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I was thinking of, for kind of the reason I stated when I asked Mr. Clark the question, my big hesitation on this list is the Sielston Sports Complex upgrades right now. So, and that could be something that you could possibly look at using revenue replacement funds for.
So that's the 150.
Yes, that's the 150. So it sounds like right now we have 3 of us willing to go forward with everything but the 150 for Sielston Sports Complex upgrades.
And I just want to also be clear what we would do if that direction is what you all want. We're not getting rid of that project. I don't think you want to address it that way. I think you want to address it that maybe this is something for future years. So we can move those kind of things out to other years.
All right. All right. So I think consensus of the board then is to move forward with the additional list minus the Sielston Sports Complex upgrades, $150,000 for current year. Move that, yep, to the right.
Okay, so I'll have a board report prepared for the November 9th meeting with our list of projects and the funding for each project identified, and we'll have that ready for you all.
Awesome. Mr. Miller.
Okay. And so for directional purposes, what we will provide you will be, you know, obviously it's the current year, but we'll also show you the 5-year with these projects moved around, because I do believe that you need to, you know, the citizens need, and you all need to see the projects extended over time. And what we'll do is the radio system is going to come back in the form of a proposed contract, I guess, that you would consider based on the information that we're going to provide to you. This, you know, so we're not taking that project and just shoving it off another year. It's because, as it has been explained to you, the process is that it would be committed in one fiscal year, and then you would not have to arrange anything financially until future years. We will make sure of that, because I don't want to certainly obligate the board to something that you're not budgeting in a current year. And so that's what we'll bring back. And is that how you all take that? That's going to be a kind of a separate discussion, maybe for another board, a full board of supervisors meeting where you would, or as a work session, however you guys want to do it. I mean, that's really up to you. Is that how you took that? Because that's how I'm taking it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I took that as that would kind of evolve a little more with some more discussion with Kyle and with Motorola. And so that was still kind of fluid right now. So
Okay.
that wouldn't be coming on the 9th.
No,
Yeah.
ma'am. I can't imagine. I mean, maybe if everybody
Let's
gets
just
everybody
say
together, but
it is not the board's expectation that
Right.
it would be ready then.
I know I asked Sheriff Giles if he did have the maintenance numbers for the current operating. He said he didn't have it tonight. So we're going to go back and put something together for you that you can make a good decision based on.
All right. So did that kind of cover our next steps to staff satisfaction?
Yes, I think so.
All right. So Mr. Miller, are we ready to adjourn? Yes? All right.
I move to adjourn until November 9th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. in the boardroom.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We are adjourned.